it might stay to the city.
Right.
But an official communication then has to go in for February's meeting. You can't do it all in one shot. So like, we'll need bonding requests, we'll need resolutions, all of that has to get prepared. And so it's all getting prepared, but for next month. And we would let them know whenever they would be on to come and speak. I mean, they can talk to you about it, but we just can't take any action tonight.
I mean, if you want me to talk about it, I'm glad to.
It's just not on the agenda.
You can talk to Doug. Can they talk to us about it for a few minutes?
Yeah, I don't know, but I
Okay.
don't want you to.
What you're gonna do is, I'm gonna give you something, bring it back next month.
All right.
Oh, you got homework?
Yeah, you
Tell
have
us
homework.
what's coming,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, that'll be
And
easy,
then next
right?
month I'll give you a quiz on it, because you'll have
Oh,
a
no,
chance to
come
read
on.
it.
Okay, we need one more council member.
That works.
I assume Rennie's coming.
Doug's not. I mean,
Huh?
Some of you probably have had this, like Doug,
Yeah.
except it's been a little updated.
thank you. Thank you, Doug. There's our city engineer over here.
Hi, Kyle.
Is it updated?
Yeah. All the technical stuff is again.
I'll share it with Summer.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Can you?
I do have one of those already, yeah. If there's extras, I know I have it as an email or as a PDF.
You might have extras.
Okay, I think that's a brand new one. I think it just,
Oh,
Can I get one more for the engineer?
Yeah, sure.
right, thank
That's, the technical stuff is all the same,
okay.
okay? But, yeah, take it. Actually, I got a question for you, John. Did you get another engineering group to come in and, nobody's been.
Tony's not
so I didn't.
Well, City Carpenter was up there making.
And John?
Yeah, I saw that, but we know that there's that.
No.
We have some. I've started to mention, who's dealt with in our.
Okay.
Out of Albany, who actually helped us with the city hall this year. He's a historic preservation architect.
Okay.
Dan Wilson.
We are
I
going
did,
to.
I got it, John.
the guy who years ago.
Hey, Doug.
Retired, but
I would expect that he was done. He was not doing bench.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other guy that was with him.
You want to start the meeting first, or you just want to talk
Yeah,
about
let's,
it? Bill? I think you're going to go first. I think you're going first, Joe.
I am staying now. Yeah, you're gonna listen.
hi. Yeah, okay, good.
When he found out that we had this tonight, he said, I'm gonna be supporting out 3 days in a row.
Okay, Tony Davis Alderman Davis is unable to attend tonight, so we have 4. So we have a quorum, one more than a quorum. So
do we each get an extra quarter vote?
Yeah, very cool. So you all have the agenda. There are a couple of changes we're going to make. First of all, Bill Knowles from the Firemen's Museum is here along with 2 other people.
Justin Agra, our president of our trustees, and Christine Bruce, our secretary.
Okay, now, Bill is on the agenda formally for next month. There's a mix-up. I thought maybe it was going to be tonight, and it's not, so forth. But while they made the effort to come, I thought I'd give them a few minutes to just brief them on what's coming down next month. So, and on it, but
Okay.
please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, Doug introduced me.
And John, you'll be next.
I'm president of the Volunteer Firemen's Hall and Museum that resides in the old Brookwood Fire Station at 265 Fair Street. Many of you have been in it. Steve, you've been listening to my tales of woe for how many years now?
Quite a few.
Quite a few, okay. Over the years, we have had multitude of roof problems. last year, the year before last, the Common Council gave put out $10,000 as a repair project that took 2 years to get instituted. This last year it got instituted, and we now have a leak-free roof for, I would say, anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And you know, we're going to need to keep an eye on it because we've already had severe damage to roof rafters that had oil went in and reinforced, so the roof didn't come tumbling down with one of the heavy snows like we've just had. I've been with the Fire Museum for well over 15 years, and there hasn't been any major repair or restoration in that time. And the nearest I can tell any full-blown restoration was like in the mid-50s. And that didn't take care of some of the other stuff. My thought, judging by what I've seen and heard from the various architects that we've had look at this over the last 10 or 15 years, is that that roof is coming close to more than 100 years old. Now it's been sealed, patched, and painted, and parts have been, replaced, but it needs to be totally redone. The roof rafters need to be totally redone. We have an architect's assessment that says that all of the beams are going to need to either be sistered and reinforced, or they're going to, and the underlayment that's under the metal roofing is going to need to be replaced with more modern and durable material. It will probably have to be, due to its historical nature, it's going to have to be a standing seam metal roof. So that's the first part of the project. The second part that was in the DRI was the brick needs to be pointed. As you look through the book, you will find pictures of where the bricks are literally falling apart. The brick in there is not the hard, durable kind of brick that some of the more modern bricks are.
It needs to be more than pointing, then, right?
Yeah, it's more than, it's not just a simple pointing. It's, some of those bricks are spalling. Okay, for those who don't know what spalling means it's flake. Water gets behind it and flakes off. There's water damage even at the base of the walls on the first floor, where water has come through the wall. I'm not really certain how, but I'm sure that John Schultes will find out what's going on there when when he brings the architects in. So that, and then you've got the windows. Again, they have not been touched in decades, many decades, my age kinds of decades. Okay, so that's what came up to the $560,000 in the DRI application. The other part of the assessment included things like heating, interior repairs, upgrades that need to be necessary to bring it up to standards and codes. That brought it up in the assessment for the DRI to about 1.2 mil. And you look at it and you say, that seems like a lot. Yeah, it is. But then you start and say, this is if you start to think about it, is on a par with some of the better museums in the state. I've had people come in, I'm talking about people who are just housewives from Long Island, and they're going in and they're saying, oh God, here's where the kids are going to play and the men are going to go, wow. She walks in and goes, oh my God, this place is wonderful. Okay, and I've had that happen more than once. This is is an important feature in the Uptown Stockade Museum District. And you have, in that district, you have the Fred Johnson House, the Person House, and the Senate House as other major museum sites. And this adds a lot to the tourism of the area. And it's also an attraction for the new folks that are coming in and buying into the area. So it is important, not just because that is where the city of Kingston, the final bill was passed by the directors of the village of Kingston. So that the city was formed out of the joining of the village of Kingston and the village of Rondo. That was passed, and then it was sent up, and 2 years later they became the city. So that is an important piece of history, not just in firefighting, but in the society of the city of Kingston. So I'm giving my
Okay.
little song
So
and
we're gonna
dance.
address this in more detail.
Yeah, we'll address it in more detail. I
Okay,
just
that's
wanted to give you the rah-rah side of the speech,
Okay,
okay?
all right,
Thank you.
all right.
If any questions that, pop to your mind right now that I might be able to answer?
All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Good, thanks, Bill. Okay, Bill, thank you. Moving on,
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
a little bit out of order.
I said,
Do you want one?
test next time.
Can I get that? Hey, Bill, can we get that last one from you?
I think this one has to go that way.
Thanks.
I can get you one.
Yeah.
Moving on, with a little out of order from the agenda. Remember last month, we talked about
See you, Joe.
the needed repairs of the pipe plan, and John Schulteis had given us an extensive memo of what he thought needed to be done and some estimate of the cost, and we got into a discussion to, do we fix or not fix, perhaps even remove the structure. And we asked John to kind of look at this a little further. So I asked John to come tonight, just let us know where we are. We're not going to be voting on anything tonight, but it's just kind of like an update of where you are.
Sure.
So thank you for coming tonight.
Sure, okay. Well, I see for tonight, you went ahead and attached the memo that I dated November 30th of last year that I wrote, giving not really alternatives, but rather a sequence that could be followed to do a complete removal and replacement at 43 to 45 North Front Street. And then that was identified as something, in near term. And in fact, we solicited and received bids for that work in November. And got back a little bit of $136,000 and change to do that relatively small section. So that's the section that has a sign on it currently saying, hey, Kingston, fix this. So that was identified as a short-term item to pursue, and then I gave you some longer-term things to look at that were not as urgent. So, and then at the December meeting, the question came back to me of what would it take to just tear the pipe plan down entirely. So I think there's a couple components to that question, which I'm prepared to discuss in a little more detail tonight, and I think Kevin is as well. So, of course, one of the aspects of that is that the recent work that was done 6 to 8 years ago was grant funded work. And so, in the case of demolishing the pipe plan, there may be a grant repayment obligation. So maybe Kevin would speak to that in a minute. I'll tell you what I've come up with a more detailed estimate of the demolition cost of the pipe plan, which I've only gotten just in the last couple days. But The number that I'm looking at is about $868,000 for demolition of the pipe plant. And that would include going through and making certain repairs and restorations of the facade where the structure attaches to the existing buildings. So I think for the $868,000 in construction costs, the thing could go away.
Yeah.
I think Kevin probably would speak to you further on the grant repayment aspect.
Okay, but this versus all these, the total here, the roll-up of all these three pieces, what did that sum up to be?
I'll do it for real quick here. I knew you were going to ask me that. There's a bit of a range there, but it's in the range of 460 to 600,000.
Right. 460 to 600. All right. Yeah. So you're really talking the demolition cost, which is almost twice as much. 75% more. Something
Yeah.
like that, yeah. Plus whatever grant monies you got. Okay. Yeah. So, how does that side look, Kevin?
Well, in terms of the communication that I got from DOT, 1.6 million was paid to the city. And before we can actually find out what we would actually have to pay back, we'd have to put in a formal request. And it would be a request that was sent to DOT, and then they would forward it to the Federal Highway Administration, since the source was federal government. So we couldn't get an idea. The only thing they would be willing to tell me was the full amount that was reimbursed to the city.
And that was how much?
1.6.
1.6 million in grants from federal, state?
From DOT, from Fed and state, yes.
State, okay. And you have no idea as to what percentage of that?
We would have to put in a formal request outlining the justification for removal, as well as other additional information. And at that point, they would decide whether it's acceptable to them and what, in fact, we would have to reimburse them for.
But is there any possibility that that would be zero?
I'm not going to speculate.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, my point, what I'm getting at is the point, even without a repayment, just looking at construction of fix versus demolition, we're talking about 868,000 versus maybe 600,000. So it's about 35–40% more to demolish it. And that's kind of the feel that I think we were looking to
I
get.
think when they do a grant, they probably put a year on it, like 20 years, 25 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So you could pretty much deduct how many years it's been up.
Right.
How many years has it been up? Anybody know? 10? 10. So you'd probably at least be half or more,
Yeah.
doing simple math.
So considerably more expensive and complicated to remove it rather than fix.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And Doug, if I could just add briefly, the only thing that I would add is that, there's one section that we know needs to be replaced, and for that one section alone, the actual bid back was $130,000 to fix one 20-foot section. 40-foot section, right, 44-foot section, basically 2 storefronts. So I just would keep that in mind, because we have not done that type of analysis on the rest of the pipeline. There have been multiple studies that are done. We've identified some deficiencies that we know we need to fix, and those are the costs that John has provided to all of you.
Yeah.
But we don't know the extent of the damage underneath all of the current existing structure in all of the other sections. And so, it could be 130,000 times 35. Potentially, once we open them all up and we see are there rotten wood, is there rotten wood under other sections similar to this one, so that we would have to do a total demolition and replacement. So that is the unknown there. Based on John's estimate, he did just give you, if it was just the 3 things or 4 things that CT Now had pointed out in their study in terms of fixing the stanchions, fixing some of the support beams. I would just, that is a caveat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How much have we spent on studies so far?
I think, Kevin, we calculated over 100?
Some of that was
Right.
support for litigation as well, but I
Right.
think the CT Mail engineers,
At the end, right?
so it was over 100,000 between study of conditions and then a full design for 43-45 replacement, and then the support for litigation. So,
Spend a lot of money and not get a specific
Roughly.
answer to what the problems are.
It's only gonna get worse.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, now winter time, that'll be another whole damage. Every season you go by,
yeah.
major effect.
One of the issues is the amount of testing you can do on a non-destructive basis. You know, the amount of access and inspection you can do without, you know, extensive amounts of pulling down ceilings, peeling back roofs.
But I think part of the original to CT Mail, they were gonna open up some areas
And they
get a
did.
general feeling for it.
In fact, they did, and use those to generalize, to say, okay, you know, here's a double 2x4. It should have been a double 2x6, and this is now stressed at 140%. And there are some reports that come to those conclusions. You know,
So that's structure, right? So that's saying,
structure. Yep.
that's big money.
Yep. So I'll add a couple more things that are in my memo. It probably bear repeating, and one is that, especially as relates to leaking of water, of roofs, is that the privately owned structures are in some cases contributing to that. And so anything that we do should be coordinated with, you know, to make a full repair. In other words, if we go through and make things perfect and the private owners don't do likewise, it's going to be for naught.
And that same case, I think, would apply to when you if you tear it all off, they still have a facade that's not in good shape that they'll
Right.
say we're responsible for possibly, right?
That would probably have to be
Works
very
on both
clearly
ends, doesn't it?
communicated.
Yeah, right?
To the extent that storefront windows have been protected for almost 50 years against driving rain,
Right.
and now they won't be.
Mhm.
You know, that's a definite concern.
Would that considered like repairing and like painting facades and things like that too? That amount? Yeah?
Within the 868?
Mm.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It
So I mean, when we were finished,
It
would look-
restores those items that, for example, probably when this thing was attached, sections of wood siding were removed. Probably on a, you know, on the masonry sections, not so much, but things like that. There's a couple of fire escapes that currently terminate on the pipe plane roof. Those will have to be restored to something that can reach the ground now. You know, there's a number of details along those lines.
Good. Well, at this point, we're not making a decision one way or the other, but I think certainly from what you told me and from the gist of the questions and the big unknown is the one that Kevin already referred to, and whatever grain givebacks associated, which probably would be substantial, maybe half or whatever, but it's certainly not going to zero. I think
So
so,
tearing down, I think, would be 2 million, right?
yeah.
If you figure if we gotta pay back half and 868,000, so approximately 2 million.
Yeah.
And then to repair it, I don't know, 35 times 100, that's like 3 million. So it's,
Well, that
without
would,
knowing, right, it's hard
It's
to,
only
That would be a
800,000 to.
yeah, for the 3 to 4 million,
yeah, but you gotta get back on
tear
that
them down and replace.
out of the 1.3. I don't know, you'd only have to get half, so you'd have
No, he's saying,
$650,000.
John's saying for approximately $800,000, we can get this thing back into decent shape, right, John?
No, the 868,000 is to demolish.
Oh, no, okay, so the
Not
460 to 600 could get this back in good shape where if
Correct.
we maintained it
Yes.
from there,
Yes,
if we did that as a
Yes.
city, it would be in good shape and we could go for
right,
it.
and I like that you brought up the ongoing maintenance, that would be, something in my mind as a continuing, budget line item per year to put maintenance into this thing.
Well, which says to me, I think we go forward, John and his people go forward with getting more details on the various components of what needs to be done, but kind of move in that direction.
In which direction?
Fix.
Okay.
Fix, repair, restore, as opposed to remove.
I mean, I was a little off on my numbers, because it was half of 1.3, so it'd be like 100 or 1.5 million to tear it down. So,
Yeah. Right.
just so we're all on the same.
Okay.
And John, that's tear down and repair all the scars on the buildings, all the holes, or everything like that one?
That's in the 868, yes.
Okay.
So is it, your direction is to pursue the repair and replacement at 43 to 45? And
Unless
generally,
somebody's
as
got a really
outlined in
strong
the plan.
argument in favor of spending all that money to demolish, I mean, that's a big difference. I mean, I can't imagine anybody's gonna sit here and argue.
So we received the bid to do 43 and 45 north front. So at this point, I could come, if it's your wish, I can come back to you with for authorization to spend that, which, I've got here at 155, so that's the construction and construction administration. If that's your wish, I'll come back to
I
you
think
with.
we're all in concurrence on that. Am I-
Was that the section that there was an accident at?
Yeah, there was a.
I mean, do we get insurance at all from any of that? Accident running into a building? No.
Well, the thing is, I think that they took out a pole there. I think, but through that accident, we realized that the poles are not actually cemented onto the
We're
ground.
not holding anything up either?
No. And so, but the actual rotting beam above is not related to the accident.
Oh.
That was actually, identified during the CTML report as one of the deficient critical areas. But there are multiple of those that were identified. And I mean, I think if the council, I think if the council is supportive of spending the 150,000 now, just remember that, this project has been kind of ongoing, and I know that we don't have a committee report written, but I think that we can write a committee report to issue that notice to proceed. So, because if we're gonna spend that money and that's the course that the council is gonna take, I would like to be able to give John the authority to start getting the bid, awarded, so that as soon as the snow, thaws, we can get work started on that section. Just so folks know, to do that, that whole section will come down. It will be demolished and then rebuilt. And so that will be the section of the pike plan that will be actually in the best condition. And we will, at some point then, if the council chooses to make kind of a general repair along the whole entire pike plan, I just think that maybe that is where some more thought and consideration of, does the city want to continue to put, to have that city-owned asset attached to private buildings for the next century? That discussion, you guys may want to incorporate more of the business owners and the building owners, because if it is going to be that, as John mentioned, if we just fix our section and the building owners don't fix their section, per se, if that is an issue, we're then going to continue to have our infrastructure be damaged. And we'll be back at this location 10 years from now with probably a very similar situation of deciding, do we spend another $400,000 to fix some of these sections, because water is just, it's an amazing thing, and it does destroy things very quickly. So I just, something to consider as we, you know, long-term, you know, is this what we want to do? And, you know, you may want to have a forum with the property owners, you may want to have a public forum for the public to just kind of hear from them before we either spend 400,000 or 800,000. Those are still big numbers, and it just, you may want to have some more input before you make that final decision. But I agree that if we're heading into the fixing section, you know, we should spend the 150. Obviously, if you guys tonight were to say, let's tear it down and fix the buildings, well, it makes sense to not spend the 150 building a new one, because that 150 gets deducted from the 860, and so, you know, you're down to the, you know, the 650s already on that. So just, that's why John kind of wants just a little bit of a direction there.
Sure. I got two other questions, if you don't mind. Now, we did get some money from a legal aspect. How much did we get for that?
$315.
$315. So we do have a little money, you know, to utilize if
Right.
to do whatever. And then I'm just trying to remember the original agreement with the, I guess, the stakeholders in the Pike Plan. Did they have to pay back some loan or money? Now, where are we with that?
Yeah, so we, so at the time that some of that last work was done, the city put a bond onto all of the 44 property owners, give or take 40, 44, and so they had to pay a fee. As part of my 2017 budget, I asked all of you to stop doing that. I thought that, and
Okay, so
we
then,
dissolved the Pike Plan Commission and we took away that, and we just incorporated that into our general bond payments, as I think many of us felt that it was unfair we put on the property owners, and so we took that away.
Okay, since this kind of evolves into another question. So they're absolved from any kind of financial obligation. So do we have a cost on what the city has to pay for, like electricity for the Pike Plan and any maintenance issues and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's still a page in the budget, it's a couple of $1,000s.
Just a couple thousand handles that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a lot of money.
Okay.
Mayor, I
We
think
may
it's-
want to up that for maintenance in the future though, right, John?
Yeah, not knowing the current amount, but yeah, there should be something annually done,
I think it's a very good idea, and we talked about this last month, that we do have a session, a hearing, or certainly a meeting with the property owners before we, you know, make a full-scale commitment on this, because, you know,
Full scale or just this repair of the $130,000?
well, I don't know, what do you think?
Well, if you're gonna go the other way, then no sense putting money into it, that's my opinion. If you're gonna, you know, decide, then I would have the public forum and figure out if you're gonna fix it or tear it down.
Before we do anything.
Yeah, before we
Yeah.
do anything.
Yeah.
get their-
I mean, this winter, I think the damage that's done is done now, because it's been so cold and so wet, and, you know, you're not gonna be able to do anything till spring, and spring is past winter, so whatever damage is gonna be done, it's gonna be done by the time we go to work on it, so.
I'm not sure what we would find, because I've been looking at a lot of people discussing this on social media, and there's two general opinions about it. One is the Pike Plan is the worst thing that Kingston ever did, and it ought to be torn down. And the other opinion is it's the best thing we've ever done, and it's why people come to Kingston and they do not want it torn down.
Well, it's not gonna be easy
Yeah,
to figure out, I'll
I'm
tell
just
you
saying,
that.
you know, I think
That's the polarization.
we can have some discussion out there, but I think ultimately we have to make a money decision. We have to make a decision based on the figures that are in front of us, that there's gonna be a lot of people for tearing it down, a lot of people for keeping it up. And certainly we want to listen carefully to the actual building owners and businesses up there. But in general, my sense is there's really very little in between.
But, you know, I don't think it'll be as severe as it used to be in that issue, because these stockholders aren't really invested in, you know, money now to do either project. So they're either gonna like it or not like it. And and that'll be basing their decision on that. You know what I mean? If you had to say, oh yeah, we're gonna keep it, oh, that means I gotta keep paying the money, or I gotta add, or, you know, do stuff like that. Or if we're gonna tear it down, okay, then I gotta sweep, and I'll have to do stuff, you know, that's, might be easier. Thinking. Plus, I think it's important too to think about it that, the Kingstonian hopefully is gonna be built there, and they'll probably wanna fit in some way of uptown's, you know, layout. And if you're gonna take all the, you know, soffits and overhangs down, then they probably will make sure they don't put any up either. Or if we're gonna put them up, then they'll probably wanna put something on there. I don't know exactly what they have now, Steve.
Yeah, so what, they went to HLPC, and, you know, their proposed drawing that HLPC has, you know, liked is that actually a majority of the building, the main building will not have.
Oh, okay.
Because that goes back to the way it
The
was
originally was.
before, when the.
They had awnings or something, right?
But the Kingstonian hotel piece of it, that historically had an awning, and so they're proposing to have an awning on that piece. But the rest of the building is proposed at this point anyway, to not have that.
Just to add what the mayor said, but the awnings on the Kingstonian building are what the plumbing yellow brick is now, so it's not going to extend onto the sidewalk.
Right, yeah, yeah, it's a, yeah.
I think we need to keep in mind that that's probably one of the oldest streets in New York State up there. Stockade District, a street in the Stockade District, and you know that street's changed its face probably many times over the course of its history, since that street was first put in. So you know we keep that in mind too.
And John, moving forward with this, aesthetically speaking, has there been any suggestions for any changes in the looks of it?
Not that I'm familiar with.
So it's gonna be reconstructed pretty much as it looks right now, right?
Right. In fact, the section at 43 and 45 that has that semicircular sign, you know, it will
Right.
have that semicircular sign.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so same green stained roof, same, you know, type of styles.
Just hopefully won't.
Right.
Well, what do you think it's a good idea to have a meeting with the property owners or some type of a forum? I'm ready to say, you know, there's so wide difference. I hate it or I love it, and is there?
I mean, if you would have been involved in prior discussions in past years, it'll be a lot of talking heads, and you still have to make the decision on your own.
So could I make a suggestion? Again, sorry, but maybe there's a two-prong approach. Maybe one thing that we could do, and maybe my communications office could help, and we could work with Dan Baker. We could potentially send a survey, like a written survey to each of the property owners that it's attached to, and then you could host then just a public forum for the general public, and if property owners want to come and speak, but you could at least then have given an opportunity to each and every property owner, even those that are not comfortable coming to a public forum, to be able to voice their opinion. And I mean, my team would be more than happy to help you with that, if that's something that would be agreeable.
Yeah, I'd like to see it out to the public, not just the business owners.
Right. Yep, so to be able to have a public meeting forum for everyone, and then a written survey that could go out to all of the easement holders. So we have an official city easement with each building.
Oh, okay.
And so there's a legal attachment between the city and each of these building owners. So I think it's a good thing to do to be able to kind of connect with them and as we go through the process.
I like the idea of surveying them.
They've got to be heard. They have to have an opportunity to express their, whatever view they want to.
Because we'll need their buy-in.
And then
whichever
in the
direction
end,
we go.
we have to make the decision, but at least we listen to them.
Now, I'm concerned about, John said that the property owners aren't keeping up their end of the bargain, not repairing the buildings. Some of the water is actually leaking down through their buildings and into the structure, which is, of course, not the city of Kingston's issue. It's the building owner's problem. They should repair those issues. Their downpipes probably are broken. They're not fixing them, things like that. So, I mean, what is our recourse to get these buildings, the owners of these buildings, to actually stop destroying the canopy?
So
What can we do?
Right, so this is one example, if I remember correctly from reading one of the reports. So you have say you have a second-story window above our ceiling, okay? Second-story window, the lower part of the window isn't sealed correctly. So you can get water running down on the inside. You can have our, as the pipeline was constructed, there may not necessarily have been kind of like a water break or some sort of, like when this was reinstalled, it was never really taken off the buildings in all cases. And so it was kind of fixed while still standing. And so there could be water getting from that second story window into our existing structure without really, not necessarily their fault because their window is leaking, but technically it could be also our fault because we have a structure that's attached to their building that is itself not waterproof or water resistant and with no like weather shield when we attach the structure to their building. So if ours was waterproof, then their water wouldn't get in. If their window
From the
wasn't-
inside of their building?
From the inside of the building, because our structure, like as John said, some of the wood siding was literally taken off when these were put on 50 years ago, and this structure is literally like attached to their building. So if their building is leaking, our structure could then be damaged. But again, that was an oversight in the construction of this thing because we didn't consider sealing this thing off from their buildings. We just kind of attached it, thinking that the buildings were in good shape. Those are the types of struggles that we have, and each different section is different. Each building is made of a different material. Each building has some have siding, some are brick, some have brick behind the siding, some have windows, some don't have windows.
So Steve, let's say we do see that. We see that there's a window sill out, the window's open all the time, rains in it, comes down on the inside, comes into our structure. I mean, can't we ask them to fix that?
Well, I think the thing is with our easement, is our easement just allows us to have our structure basically on their property, like on their building. But I don't believe that there are any requirements in it, because an easement is generally given like it was kind of like a property easement. It's not really a maintenance agreement. It was really an easement for our property to be on their property, because they own that property. You know, that's their property. We are attached to their property, and so really, if anything, they should have an agreement. Like it should say in the easement that we are responsible for making sure that we don't do anything to their property, not usually the other way around.
You know what I'm thinking though? These are 3-story structures made out of brick, a lot of them. I mean, if there's structural problems going on there, our building department should be in there looking at that, saying you need to fix the structure before it falls down, before the face of this thing falls off onto the North Front Street. So I'd imagine we have some kind of recourse, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know that it extends to that, but there's definitely water intrusion, building envelope issues between the private side and the public side, and in many locations intermingled. Water spray testing was conducted, at various locations, and then they would spray a hose at it and check how many minutes it took to appear at a known leaking location. And, a lot of, you can read through those reports, and they're, in some cases it's clearly us, and some it's clearly them, but I agree with the mayor, if both are in perfect condition, great. If either one is not, one can cause a problem for the other.
It's very complicated.
Yes.
The easements allows us to basically fix and repair our own structure as it's attached to the buildings. Problem is that the pre-existing conditions of the building could be altered and affected by our structure. There's a whole, it's a very complex and difficult to assess what contributed to what.
Right. But our building inspector should be able to go in there and see what's going on, don't you think? No?
Our structure is not physically making the buildings weak to the point where their structure is in question.
Yeah.
But in terms of the damage that, to what extent leaks were exacerbated by our structure being connected. That's what's difficult to actually assess. What's actually contributing to what?
Yeah.
And you're talking about buildings that are 100+ years old, so you know, no perfect building envelope to be found on something of that age.
So at this point, we don't have the authority to go in and do like a spray test like you just talked about without their permission, right? Or we can't just-
On their structure, no.
Right.
Right at the point where we attach, yes.
Right.
I like the idea of doing the surveys, putting this off for one more month, and seeing what the easement holders say, because I think that would be rather significant. Because, you know, even if we put this on a pure money basis, once we start thinking about this 5, 10, 20 years out, if we keep it as versus taking it down, you know, a lot of these are complicated issues. That's the question, how long do we want to keep dealing with this if we can't put it into some kind of good condition that will last for decades?
How would we go about designing such a survey? Who would do that?
We asked the mayor.
If you guys are okay with it, you know, we can,
Yeah.
Our communication team summer can help. It doesn't have to be complicated, and so, you know, it shouldn't take us very long to do and get out to the business owners, or the building owners, which is different sometimes than the business owner. So what we have to make that clear is that, you know, this would go to the property owners, not the folks who potentially run businesses within these buildings. It's the actual owner, based on our assessment records, is who would get the surveys and be asked to fill them out.
Okay.
But this survey would be for us, right? For our knowledge, correct?
Yeah, we would send it to them and bring it back to you to provide you all with that information.
Now, do you want to send a request to DOT to see how much we'd have to pay back at the same time, or?
I don't know what's involved with that. I mean, it's just
Well,
you're closer to it than
Let's
anyone.
put it this way, I don't think we're bound. If we explain the circumstances and say that that is one of the initial considerations or one of the plans that we're taking into consideration, explain the circumstances, see how they respond. I mean, I don't think if they come back with a high number and then we decide that, you know what, this isn't the right solution for us, that now, because we simply made the formal request, we can't change our mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd say put the ball in their court, let them say no if they don't want to do it.
Not sure there's anyone working at HWA at this point, so we'll work on it. We'll
Might
send
take
it in.
a while.
We may not hear back by next month, but we will send it in.
Okay, somewhere in the 1 to 3 months, before the really good weather is here.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Very good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
John.
John.
Thanks.
Okay, let's, Kristen, you have about 3 items here that.
Yeah.
The top 3 items on the agenda.
The first one is quite simple. It's just a transfer of funds from one account in the Parks and Recreation budget to another account in the Parks and Recreation
Good
budget.
question on that. Where's, I see the money's going to contracted services,
Yes.
but where's the money coming from? I don't recognize that account number.
I wish John Toohey was here, because he gave me those numbers.
What account number was it?
43389. 2343389.
I think that's one of the grant kind of receivable.
Yeah.
So
So,
we get the grant money in, but then we have to transfer it to contracted services to
Right,
spend it. Yeah.
It's just that I couldn't find it in the budget.
Yeah, I think it's one of his internal, it's not like a department account, it's one of his grant receivable accounts, I believe.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So essentially, it's so that we're able to utilize the money to pay the vendors who have done work on the project. We paved the Forsyth parking lot last year, and so we need to pay those vendors.
I move that we approve the budget transfer.
Yeah. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I'm gonna be here till midnight.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay,
The next one is this is a resolution that's required by the New York State Office of Parks and Recreation. They've given us a grant for through the recreational trails program, to pave a portion of the Hudson Landing Promenade as part of the Empire State Trail. And this is a resolution to authorize extending those funds, accepting executing any documents and expending the funds in the first instance.
do we need a committee report? Hmm?
Kind
Yeah.
I think put it in the wrong line, so you have to go button.
Yeah, do you have a blank one?
John's only has one. Committee reports, there is.
might be some,
Yeah.
Lisa.
Do you actually vote, Jim?
Oh, I gotta vote too.
So excited about being on the wrong line. Forgot to vote.
Okay.
Are they in there?
There's a general one, maybe you can use that one, here's the other one.
Yeah, the general.
Okay.
Frank, would you like a job?
Yeah.
Not qualified.
Yeah.
I do need a pen, if anybody.
We just have to rewrite all the names.
Okay, so can you vote, or do you need me to write this up first?
Write it up.
Is that yours?
Thank you.
Basically, you're saying, execute and expend funds in accordance with the attachment.
All right, back up.
Yes.
Say that, and then I'll write in the right names.
Adopt, one of our voting members has left.
Okay, I'll write them.
You got four.
Huh?
You got four.
Okay, adopt a resolution to accept funds and execute any and all documents from the New York State Office of Parks and Recreation, Historic Preservation, and Recreational Trails Program, and expend them in the first instance.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on this one, you're gonna have to write your own names in.
What? Oh, come on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
We'll make sure we get some extra copies of it.
Yeah.
I had all the committee reports for everything else.
You do,
Sorry.
you do, yeah. So the next one is the FEMA grants, right?
Yep.
You tell me.
These are fairly simple as well. These are for 2 FEMA grants that we have. There's no match involved from the city. It's for a project to make repairs in the TR Park and Marina, mostly electrical and dock repairs, and the other one is for making repairs to the electrical system and the items in the lighthouse that were damaged in Hurricane Sandy.
Is there a motion to spend these funds for this?
So there's no financial impact to the city?
There's no financial
Right.
impact. The
Motion.
local match is met by the
Second?
New York State.
Great.
And that's for the Chiarella Park and for the lighthouse. I need a motion there.
Motion. Second.
Okay, all in favor? I'm passing for the lighthouse, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? For the Chiarella Park, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm in favor. Okay. Good.
All right, that's it.
Thank you.
You were any answer, or
Hmm?
you got it?
I'll
You got
give
it.
it to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Steve, you want to talk about the IDA now?
Yeah, Dan Baker and I, we can tag team, and Kevin, but I just wanted to, I guess I'll come closer. As many of you saw in my communication, and then with a follow-up, we basically are requesting, home rule legislation, to be able to allow, the city of Kingston, to create, its own IDA, Industrial Development Agency. There has been, and still is, a county IDA. County IDAs, as you have worked with before, they work on a variety of different tax incentive programs around the state. They develop their own policies. When projects deviate from those policies, they then sometimes involve local jurisdictions, and that's why you've seen some IDA pilots come through, and Dan has come and talked. Some of the most recent ones were related to Yasmin Towers and Governor Clinton that you all worked on a year and a half ago at this point. But with some of the changes that we're seeing at the IDA, and I think a recognition that it may be in the city's best interest to be able to set our own policies and procedures related to these going forward. I felt that it was an appropriate time to ask the state for the approval to create our own. Many cities have their own IDAs. Every nearby city of Poughkeepsie, up in the Albany area, many of the cities all have their own IDAs, and we felt like it was time for Kingston to kind of join that list. And so then what we have to do is, if we get support and if this passes the council, it then goes to the state legislature, and then it is up to our local representatives, both in the Assembly and the Senate, to carry those bills. If those bills then pass the Assembly and the Senate, they then go to the governor's office, and then if the governor's office signs that bill, it then comes back to us, and we then work through the rest of the process of creating the idea. Did I get that right?
So what action do you need from us?
So tonight is to pass a resolution to, yeah, there it goes. It's basically, there was a draft of the home rule legislation, is basically to pass a committee report that indicates that we're adopting that home rule legislation. It's a very specific letter that both the councils of some of the offices that we're working with helped us craft, and so it has to state very clearly certain legislation. That's why the resolution is a little long, but that's the process.
Okay.
And,
Well, this is good, so.
yes, and that's the committee
Okay, so
report.
approving the submission of a home rule request for the enactment of special legislation for the city of Kingston to create its own industrial development agency in the form of Senate bill and its matching Assembly bill.
Steve, is this home rule request, this home rule allows us to do this?
Yes.
Is this
So
what?
general municipal law states that cities are allowed to have their own industrial development agencies.
And this home rule request is just us requesting it?
Yes.
And it doesn't allow for anything else besides this, does it?
Correct. It's just, it allows for us to request that. It then is up to the legislatures in both houses to carry that request for us, but they're not able to do that without our concurrence locally first.
Nothing else going through with this except the IDA?
Correct. Yeah.
But then this request would be tantamount to the Common Council approving the creation of an IDA, right? Or would there be a second step?
So my understanding is it starts here to create one. It then goes to the houses, governor's office created. We then would have a whole series of things that we would still need to do in terms of setting up the board, deciding how that's going to be set up, who's going to appoint those members, you know, administratively going to manage it. That all would then have to get set up and approved, you know, so that it could actually get started and members could get appointed. All that happens after the state and governor signs the bills.
Could you go over one more time why you think we need this IDA?
Sure.
I did hear that you wanted to, you know, there's tax incentives and things like that we might be involved in. Can you just explain why we might need this?
Yes, so what IDAs, you know, have the ability to do can everything from exempt, you know, set up pilots, as we've talked about. They can do that. They can also waive sales tax. They can waive mortgage tax. Those are the three main components that IDAs do at the county level, and we would be able to have those same powers granted to us here. We then, and one of the most important parts of an IDA is deciding who and what entities get access to those types of you know, tax incentives to bring jobs. And so what you create and what the council creates and with the IDA are policies and procedures. So for instance, if the county decided that they were no longer going to support senior housing for their pilot program and they were just going to focus on attracting boutique hotels, that could have an impact on Kingston because we want to be able to support creating new senior housing, and we want to be able to incentivize people to come in here and create that senior housing. And so that would, that's where there could be a difference of opinion between the county IDA and what a local jurisdiction like Kingston would want. And so by having our own, we would be able to set our own policies to say, look, we don't really need to support boutique hotels. We'd prefer to support housing, or we prefer to support boutique hotels and we don't want to support housing. That then decision can be made locally by people in Kingston instead of being made at a county-wide level by people that may not represent Kingston, may not know Kingston, may not understand what our economic development needs are here. And so that's a reason why, you know, it's home rule is that, you know, we have the ability to create our own and kind of foresee our own future.
And the waiving of the sales taxes and, did you say income tax too?
Mortgage tax.
Mortgage tax.
Mortgage reporting tax.
Mortgage report. The waiving of this, right? Would that have to go through us? Would we have to approve that, or would the IDA have the power to just say, you don't have the taxes?
In most situations, it's the IDA.
It's the IDA that has the
has
authority
that,
to do
yeah.
that under their.
So there's be a board set up that has the authority to say, you don't have to pay your taxes.
So the.
And then we wouldn't have any, the council would not have power over that.
The council and the mayor would have, depending on how the legislation is set up, would have jurisdiction over the selection of the members of that board.
Yeah.
The council would?
The council and the mayor's office usually have appointing authorities. Yeah.
How many members of the current IDA are Kingston residents?
I don't know if there are any currently.
My sense is it's not any.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So in other words, this is a way for Kingstonians to ensure that we would have much more say in the use of these instruments.
Okay, is there a motion on this? There's a motion. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, carried.
And just as an aside, we're not sure how long this process will take. You know, we will deliver after the full council meeting. If it's passed, it would go to then those two branches of government, and it we hope could be taken up this session. Session runs till June, but as we've seen, the legislature and the Senate have been very busy passing lots of bills and trying to, kind of get through a whole full legislative agenda. And so we're not sure how this is going to fall within all of that. It could be this year. It may not be this year. It could be next year. We don't know.
We just slip it in with all the other ones.
We don't know, but this is like at least the start of what could be a relatively long journey for us.
And Steve, let me get this straight. So the county IDA, which I understand kind of what they do.
Yep.
This would somehow empower us
Yes.
to
Create our own uniform tax exempt policy.
create our own uniform tax exempt policy.
So they have their own uniform tax exempt policy, which the county feels.
And why were IDAs, do you know why IDAs were even implemented in the first place? I mean, why is this? Why are IDAs important?
Well, I do
The
believe.
question,
What?
the question.
I do believe.
It is a good question.
It is a good question. Why are IDAs important?
Why are they important? And
Yeah.
it
Or are we
allows-
just counteracting another IDA because we want to get? Are we doing this to?
I think for.
Are we doing this as a proactive thing, or are we doing this as a reactive thing? That's what I'm trying to ask. I mean, if it's a reactive thing, I'm not so happy about that. If it's a proactive thing, maybe I'll be happy about it.
One of the first times Steve and I met, when he became mayor, this is one of the items that we have talked about, is be able to control the destiny of the city of Kingston. People who are elected, are here in the city of Kingston, are able to, control that destiny better than someone from New Paltz or Shandaken. Maybe there are items and maybe there are businesses that we would like to attract to the city of Kingston that we're unable to because we don't have the powers to do that. This allows the residents of the city of Kingston to potentially do that. It's not to say it's just a tool just to use. It's a hammer that you will swing around just to swing it. It's just a tool in the toolbox for the right job. We have the Kingston Local Development Corp. I think that does a good job with what it can do, but it doesn't have the same powers and authorities that the Industrial Development Agency can do.
So you're saying the powers that we will receive are actually going to be good for the city of Kingston,
I think
and not just because we can now block the maybe a bad decision by the county, but because we can make good decisions. Is that correct?
It empowers the city to do what it to control its economic destiny.
Better.
It's an economic development tool, right? And I think that we've never really, had tools at our own disposal that we could go out and find good paying jobs for Kingston. We always relied on other people to do our economic development work for us, mostly the county. And they've, assisted and they've been supportive, but, we've never had local control and local incentives to say, look, we want this type of businesses, let's attract. And, the Kingston Business Park is a great business park, and the KLDC, has land, they have space, but what tools do they have? And they're limited by their charter and by authority that they can't provide, they can't give incentives. They can provide you a loan at a market rate loan or a little below market rate loan, but they can't say, if you bring 40 jobs here, we're gonna enter into an agreement with you to be able to waive, some of your fees so that you can make that happen.
So this is really what we're looking to be able to do, right, Steve?
Yeah. So it's both for jobs and for development. So, I mean, depending on what the IDA decides to do, and it means that we're in control and we aren't at the whim of the county IDA.
Okay. And I am a little concerned about this entity having power over the council.
Well, they're limited by what IDAs do. They
There's
don't.
a certain set of rules that they have to follow.
Yeah, so there's, in general municipal law, so they are, they have an entire set of kind of bylaws. They act as the public authority, so they have a lot of, reporting and responsibilities. And I think that the role that the council has, with the mayor's office is to, set, who these people are and to be able to set policy and procedure related to removal of these people, the appointment of these people, and, some of how it operates is, it's developed by all of you, to be able to make sure that these things are
you know, successful and kind of watched out over, and, you know, we've seen, you know, really great success stories with IDAs when they're managed well, and I think that that's the key piece of all of this, is that we just.
They would have no more power than the county IDA has over the city, you know, it's the same
All right,
thing.
so their function would be to give us recommendations, or could they bypass us?
You would.
We would not be in the
You would,
picture.
You and the mayor would appoint members to this.
And then they would act
agency,
independent
and
of
that
us.
agency would act independent of you.
But the current IDA acts independent of us way more than a city one would, because we have no control who's appointed to the
Right,
county.
oh, yeah, I get that.
And what control would we have as who's appointed? We would just set up the policies that the mayor would have to follow?
No, so for many
With the
cities,
appointments?
so what many cities have is that, you know, mayors will make a recommendation of a member, and then the council has to vote on their appointment.
Is that what is that what you're first seeing?
That seems to be the common way that I've seen it done, so that both branches of government are then involved in the process.
Is that what you foresee
Yeah.
happening?
Now, I'm presuming there's a template for setting all this up, right?
Yeah, the state's got lots of guidelines and templates, and there's, you know,
City
cities.
county would give you one.
Yeah. There's cities that, you know, we've looked at, you know, actually right in general municipal law, it lists every city in New York State that has one, and so the list is available, and Kevin can share that around, so we have it. So just to give you a sense, you can go to that city's website, check out their IDA, see what kind of projects they've worked on, just to kind of get a sense of what, you know, a city IDA looks like, how it feels, how it operates, and
They're pretty self-efficient because they charge fees also
they
to
do,
pay
and
for
they
their.
bring in revenue to help pay for, some of them are
Whatever they
actually
have to do.
supported by city staff, some of them have their own staff, it depends on the model, but they all do bring in, as part of the application process, they bring in, sometimes the application can bring in $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 depending on the size of the project, which then helps fund the operation of the agency, if you will. It's like a kind of like a standalone economic development agency that is just focused on Kingston, and oftentimes, you know, the pilot is one piece of it, but because they're able to bring in fees and generate revenue, that staff person acts as kind of the economic development guru for your city, working to bring in jobs, working to sell Kingston as a good place to live and work, and that's again something that, you know, they do at the county level. The IDA funded, until recently, the county economic development office to recruit businesses for Ulster County through that funding that they get. We don't have a funding stream for economic development.
It sounds great. The only thing that keeps resonating in my brain is, I wonder if the city of Kingston, the people of the city of Kingston who voted for us, really don't want something that the IDA is proposing. And the IDA says, too bad. We can't do anything about that. And our our constituents can't do anything about that. We're literally giving up that power. It's just something it's just like,
We don't have that power now. It's the county one that has that power.
I know.
You bring the.
I'd rather have the power than that.
What's that?
You bring those concerns that you have,
Yep,
you bring them closer to you,
yep.
and the city of Kingston's leaders, yourself, gain more control over the people who are being appointed and making those decisions.
As opposed to the county
now-
officials.
Right now, those are so far away from your touch.
Okay.
They're not in your reach,
All right.
okay?
Thank you.
So it should be reassuring to you, to your point, it should be more reassuring that developing, you know, and supporting this agency would bring that closer to home, to make those.
As opposed to a county agency doing it?
Correct, because the appointments that this council and the mayor would make would be able to have people there that they feel would form a uniform tax exempt policy that would represent your beliefs and the city of Kingston beliefs. So inside each.
We can only hope, right?
Patrick, we're not talking about a runaway train.
No, I know, I'm just worried about things like that. You know, I think about government, Kevin, I think about how it operates, and I think about how entities, you know, use their power. You know, so my thoughts and comments are not off base, I don't think.
And I'm not suggesting they are, but I'm just saying that statutorily there are limits and restrictions to how this agency has to operate. Probably the most beneficial aspect about having our own IDA is we have the ability to impose conditions. Not only impose conditions, but make sure they're followed, which is something that we haven't been overly successful with the county.
I hear you, so it sounds like a positive thing.
It's very positive.
Yeah, it sounds like a positive thing, I'm just, you know, I just worry about these little things that could go wrong. I'm just one of those people who always look at what could go wrong with this, and if it does go wrong, how bad could it get? You know, that's all I'm trying to think about. I'm not thinking I don't want it, I'm just thinking like,
You probably have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen.
But we'll definitely, if it passes the council, we'll definitely keep you informed as to what the legislative outlook of this is as best we can.
Okay,
thanks.
so we move on to the bus merger, MOA.
Sure. Yeah, and so Kevin and I have been working diligently on the this bus merger with the county. I know we've updated you all before to kind of the process, but one of the things that we've gotten to the point of is being able to have draft documents for you to review. The county has provided us, with a draft MOA that we've looked at and reviewed and feel is got a lot of details in it, as well as an actual council resolution, which is what would be needed to pass that would allow me to sign the MOA, but would also allow our assets that we have that are currently federally owned to be able to be transferred to the county as part of the merger. The county and I have agreed that July 1st would be a good date for us to make this change. We feel like that still gives us enough time to be able to get the new routes prepared, to be able to educate residents to the change. But we feel that this would be a relatively seamless transition because UCAT already does operate in the city, and many of you see UCAT buses already driving around, and they already pick up passengers in the city and transfer passengers, and so they are already familiar with our process. The financial component of that, and why we're here at finance in particular, is that as part of the MOA, there would be 5 years of payments made to the county as part of this transition. $225,000.
5.5, I think.
Yeah.
Wait, total or per year?
Per year.
Annual.
Annual. We currently spend, upwards of $300,000 a year of local taxpayer dollars on city bus. And so when all is said and done with overtime and long-term health care costs and pension costs, they all add up. And so we feel like this is not only a good deal for Kingston taxpayers, because for the next 5 years we're going to be capping our number, and we'll know what that number is. But then at the end of the 5 years, this agreement will sunset, and the county will take over full costs of operating the new integrated system across the city as part of this deal. And so they'll again be responsible over that 5 years for capital purchases, as well as ongoing maintenance and management of the busing.
Okay, knowing John could not attend tonight, I asked him, where's the city get the 112.5 one-time payment and the 225 annual for 5 years? And he said, this will come from our operating budget. We will have to do a transfer to eliminate the second half of 2019 expenses and revenues, and then add in one-time payment, which is approximately 1/2 of our normal operating deficit. When netted out, the 2019 budget transfers that we need should come close to a zero impact. And keep in mind, factoring all the costs, bus operations run at a deficit of more than $225,000 per year. Capital costs, retirement, health insurance, workers' comp, and other insurance costs that you talked about will all experience savings. These are not part of the city bus budget. So after year 5, the agreement brings the city to a net cost of zero, saving a minimum of $225,000 per year going forward. So the long-term savings are tremendous.
Yeah, and so all of that, we will also see, we believe, great increases in ridership, because they're going to be able to take a bus system that basically a bus comes by the bus stop once every hour. It will be now down to about once every 20 minutes, which will be much better for all of our bus riders. They'll also be adding Wi-Fi to the buses. They'll also be, our buses will then be brought into their app. They actually have a mobile app with GPS units on each bus that actually show you where your bus is and how long till it gets to you. And so those features will then be expanded into Kingston as part of this process. And we feel that, you know, between the long-term cost savings for the city as well as the improvements to our bus system, you know, we will be able to, you know, really have a well-functioning public transit system here in Ulster County because of this, you know, joint project.
So you're asking for the authority to essentially,
Allow me to, we've got another committee report, but basically allow us to, you can read it.
yeah, authorizing the dissolution of the city bus transit service in the city and approving the entry into an agreement with Ulster County to provide expanded transit service in the city of Kingston and appropriation of funds therefore.
Have we reached any agreement, decision about our employees?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and so in the MOA, there is a paragraph in there, and basically what it says is that the Ulster County Area Transit System will offer all of our full-time drivers a job opportunity, and then there are 2 administrative staff that work currently for the city on the administrative side, and then those 2 employees we just brought in, if they're interested, into our city system in other jobs that are open or.
I didn't see that, but.
Yeah, it's just one paragraph.
At similar pay, similar benefits, and the
No one will
job,
be harmed, if you will, in the project, and that's a federal
except
law.
moved laterally maybe.
Correct. Yes, and they'll be able to keep their seniority and their, all of that stuff.
And they'll be able to keep everything that they have now, so that we're not disrupting their lives
Yeah.
too badly.
So-
Except the fact that they may be moved into a job that's different.
But
I mean,
still be able to ride in Kingston.
I only got to read this like
Still
yesterday
work in
or
case-
so. So I didn't really get a lot of time. I mean, I tried to get as much out of it as I can, but, what was I gonna say? Now it kinda says in here, all our assets will be given to the county. Does that mean trolley buses, everything that we own?
All of the federally owned assets will be given to the county.
And all money we're receiving goes to the county, right?
Yeah.
Which should make sense.
Yep, so we will still then keep all of the non-federally owned assets, which includes the trolley buses, a couple of the paratransit buses. Those don't have any federal life left on them, if you will. They're depreciated. We have them much longer than the feds think we should have them, because, but you know, those would stay with us. The county is not interested in those.
I mean, I like the parts in there about, you know, I think it's after 6 months, after 2 years, you review the routes that they're taking and
Yeah.
see if the people are happy with them. I mean, I looked at those routes, I didn't really think they were the best routes for my way of thinking, but I don't use the bus, so I'm probably not a good person to make that decision. But now it says in there that we'll like park all their buses for 6 years possibly, so wherever they park now, they'll still be parking for 6 years.
So it's an option for them. You know, they at some point hope to be able to build a larger bus garage on their own property, but for now they asked, you know, would they be able to rent space from us
For 5 years.
for up to 5 years, and so we've not just figured out, one, are they going to do that? 2, how much rent they'll provide us? But they will, because they'll get reimbursed from the federal government, so
Right.
they will.
You said
And
that.
so, but yes, right now some of our buses also just park outside, and I think that once they realize that, they're going to just want to. They're going to park outside here. They're probably just going to park outside up there. We still have to work out some of those details, but they did want that in there in case they do need it. But our bus garage currently does hold, but we don't park the.
So now say something like the bus mechanic, what happens to him?
Yeah, and so there is any employees that were paid or partially paid for by bus, you know,
Like
would
the
come-
traffic officer,
Yeah,
she
so
gets a
a
portion.
partial part of her salary, so that again would be borne by us. And the mechanic, we kind of thought ahead on that, and so there was we eliminated that. There was a vacant mechanic that we already eliminated.
Oh, okay, so he's just
in the
gonna move
budget.
into a vacant slot.
Yeah.
Bernie, you got a,
Yeah, I have a question, Steve.
Yeah.
Some of the equipment acquired for the Public Works garage
Like the bus wash.
is used for heavy vehicles,
Yeah.
fire apparatus, as well as
Yeah.
Public Works. Are we gonna lose any of that? Are we gonna have to turn it over to them?
Sure, so there's actually, there's only 2 pieces of equipment that still have any federal life other than buses,
Okay.
and that's the bus wash. And so the bus wash will just be a secondary a bus wash for the county buses to use. And so that As long as we continue to allow buses to get washed in there, we don't have to disassemble the building and remove it. And then there is actually only one other piece of equipment, and it's a truck lift, and it has about $1,500 left of life on it. So that's it. And then we are free and clear of all of
And we
the,
have to assume our own responsibility to repair fire apparatus and so forth.
yeah.
Now, Steve, how about Parks and Rec? Do they use our buses? Does the school system use our buses? I mean, who will be affected?
County Chuck is in charge of all that.
So we will have our own extra buses around. And so if Parks and Recreation for their summer programs decide they would like to hire a bus driver to run their summer shifts or to run their camp to camp to camp, we would do that because we still have a trolley bus, we'll still have some paratransit buses. So that's just a position that we could hire if we wanted to have a driver. But at this point,
And is there any usage that you can think of that we would be giving up with giving up the bus routes?
you know, I think
I
that-
mean, any extra besides just the normal bus routes? Is there any other things that we do for the community? Because I know transportation is a very important thing to people in the community who don't have transportation. It's a major issue.
So I mean, all of the people that don't have transportation, right, they're gonna get their county bus service, it's gonna be great, they're gonna love it. The city bus does do a lot of charters, and you know, we try to make that service available, and you know, in conversations with the county, they too said that they would make charters available, like they do currently in other places, it's just folks will have to pay for it. And so, you know, just like, I think they, right now the Garlic Festival uses UCAT to help transport people, and the organizers of the Garlic Festival just, they pay, you know, to be able to use UCAT service. UCAT just doesn't do it for free.
How about like the Hooli,
Right,
things
so
like
that's
that?
the thing. So they would, that could still be available by UCAT. It's just the organizers of the Hooli would have to pay them.
And they don't now?
No, we include that as just.
Or
part
they'd
of it.
have to be available too, you know, through the county.
Right.
Because they decide.
Tanya,
Yeah.
Thanks. So, a couple of questions. This document, is this available online?
Yep,
Is
it's
that
on
one of
it's on our
the,
website.
that's on one of the attachments for this? And the free bus service that's going to start, that will be for the 6 months starting in July?
Yep.
Is there going to be a campaign to advertise that?
I don't, that's,
Would be all this county?
it's the county. Yeah, that was their proposal and that's
Okay.
their initiative. So the county the county executive proposed in his budget address, that starting July 1st through the end of December, all bus users in the city of Kingston would have free transit service for the first 6 months, to kind of try to encourage new transit users into the system, and then the transit fares would then go back into effect in January, is, you know, what the county executive had indicated, but that would be on them to kind of advertise that message and figure that all out.
And changes to the routes, we would have impact on that? The city would be able to give feedback? Is there any sort of guarantee that we would get a response?
So there is, there was already a transit integration study that took place where they did all new route mapping, and they held multiple public meetings to create those routes. So they did have a lot of public input on those. Once they try those out, and as it says in the plan, that they would then come back to the community within 6 months, and I think it's 2 years, was it? To kind of reevaluate how those routes are working out.
Okay, and I know that they didn't, the head of UCAT didn't anticipate being able to cover 2 lunch breaks right after that, or 2 breaks in service during the day, although I understand it would be less of an impact if it's a half an hour instead of an hour lead time. But she didn't anticipate being able to cover those 2 lunch breaks. Has that changed since that study was just finished?
I'm not sure, they don't have lunch breaks like we have lunch breaks in our schedule, so I think it would be a regular traditional bus schedule without breaks.
Without any breaks?
Yeah. I think that's what the.
Now, Steve, let's say we want to, business is doing great.
Yeah.
Steve Savona comes to you and says, hey man, let's run a bus from uptown to downtown Friday, Saturday nights, right? We're doing great. People, you know, I think we'd have more business. I think we'd generate more taxes in the city if we had this bus route. what happens?
So then I think what we do is, similar to what we would do here around this table, is that if you asked me to do that now with City Bus, I would come back to you and say, hey, you think that's a really good idea? This is how much it's gonna cost. And so what they do in New Paltz is that the SUNY New Paltz worked with the Village of New Paltz to create a New Paltz loop. It was kind of outside of UCAT's regular service. They wanted a bus that people could take on Friday and Saturday nights to go out and have a few drinks and some food. And so they created a loop bus. And so what happens is that I think SUNY New Paltz and the Village, they chip in and they pay, or maybe SUNY New Paltz pays for the whole thing, I'm not sure. But they basically go ahead and they pay UCAT to run that bus service.
So UCAT does run
Yep.
it
And so if
on
the
Saturdays?
businesses wanted to get together, or if we felt as a city that we really needed this specialized tourist-based, dinner night
On
out
Saturday,
kind
maybe
of,
Saturday mornings or something, I don't know.
then we would just have to kind of chip in to do that, just like any other community would, or have it be sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce or things like that. And they do that already in other places.
Now, how about our most severe need people? How would they, I don't know, are on the cusp of getting ambulatory as opposed to bus?
Right. So
What happens to them?
paratransit. So there will
What's
still
that called,
be
paratransit?
Yeah.
What happens to them?
There will still be full-fledged paratransit. So not only will we have the regular scheduled routes, paratransit is available for anyone that fits that bill. And you basically, even now, you call up, you make an appointment, the bus comes, picks you up, brings you to your doctor's appointment, brings you to wherever you need to go. And that will still continue to exist. With UCAT, UCAT does that already. They even help us out sometimes because we have a high need in the Kingston area for that. And so that's, they plan to do that, that's already scheduled to do, and they'll continue to still offer paratransit service. Those are usually the smaller buses, sometimes it's vans that you see running around. Yeah.
Is there a motion on the resolution?
Motion.
Second.
Speaking of, do you have the previous resolution? It never came all the way around. The
Stop it,
IDA.
Nick. Good stuff. Steve, did you sign that?
I second, yeah.
Did you sign it?
Sign
The
one.
IDA
Which one?
legislation.
I thought I handed it to you.
Yeah, I thought you had it.
Me? Did I cover it up?
I don't know if you gave it to Jim and he lost it. Or unless Bernie took it.
I don't know.
Hey, while you're looking, can you vote on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
No.
no, I'm opposed.
We have, let's see, take the vote again, all in favor?
Aye.
That's 3, and opposed? Resolution passes 3-2. Yeah, I think so, yeah. We kept you busy on that.
Okay, lots going on.
Yes, there is.
You got it? I don't know, you got it.
Did you find the other one?
Yeah, he's got it.
Hmm?
It's coming.
Okay. All right, now, the ever patient Kyle, thank you for
We find that thing?
This is on there.
for the microphone system,
Obviously, city.
which I can't wait.
So I was tasked with giving the full quote now, that's what, this is a complete replacement, no more hot plugging or things.
Let's get this other paperwork on the table first.
Did you vote on that one?
Did I sign that one? I did. I don't, they're looking for another one, though, the IDA one. I don't seem to have it. Oh.
Did you vote no on that one? or what?
Oh, look who's got it. Look who's got it. I signed it and everything.
Did you vote on that?
Sabotage is here.
Patrick,
I got it.
I thought you voted no.
I did.
You checked yes.
Oh, can I see? I didn't know that one.
So you really want to vote yes, you see?
Yeah.
You see?
Well,
Your
I'm a little
subconscious
concerned,
mind.
you know, a city bus
All right,
system is important to a city.
I think you,
You know, it's something we have,
I'll take
we can help our people out with,
Let
and
you
That's true, but
You know
there's
if-
one factor there.
direct your vote.
one factor there. Right now, the buses run once an hour. If you miss the bus, you're 2 hours at the stop. If the county runs them every 20 minutes,
Or so they say.
that is such a vast improvement.
But you know, if we don't pay, they'll take it from our sales tax. What's in there too?
What's that?
So we don't pay their quarterly $225 or whatever, they'll take it out of the sales tax.
Takes out of sales tax.
Well, we'll just pay the
They
$225.
obviously don't trust us, right?
It's in the
Pay our
contract.
bill, yeah.
No, you know, I just worry that, you know, we're giving up, as elected officials, people in the city of Kingston, we, you know, we have, you know, transportation's a very important thing for people, especially people without transportation, and to give it to another entity to control. And like we said, the IDA, we want to control that because we control it, right? So to give up our bus system to that same entity which we don't want the IDA to control us, is like we're giving up that. You know what I'm saying? We're giving up something, the power to do that. That's all.
Can we move on?
Yes.
Most in favor. Kyle, on the microphone.
Back to microphones, so I think everybody can agree the microphone system that we have kind of sucks at this point. But there's also an urge to replace it in the near future. In July of 2020, we can no longer operate 8 or 9 that are left in there that have to be replaced because they're currently on a frequency that the FCC tells us we have to be off of by the July of 2020. T-Mobile bought it for LTE phone service. And we've actually been experiencing interference issues, and T-Mobile's been here, and they've been telling me they've been testing their network. So I don't know if some of that's related or not, they won't really say, but that's one issue. The other, you know, most of the microphones that are back there at this point are 15 plus years old, except for maybe 3 or 4 of them that we started buying. So what you got tonight before you was a complete replacement, starting from scratch, doing it over, and doing the ceiling speakers as well. For 16 microphones. This kind of copies the system that the county was using. They had like a gooseneck microphone with a little lithium-ion battery and a base. You could either push and hold to talk or push it, you know.
We're not getting the headsets like rock and roll?
Yeah, it
guys?
doesn't.
Oh, come on.
But just basically more a current generation microphone system. It has an interface, they'll check battery levels, you can mute a speaker, you can see all of it on the screen on the computer and kind of monitor it from there. So just something more modern, something current. The only 2 differences in the 2 quotes that you had is that one quote was a little bit cheaper, doesn't have like charging bases for everything, so you have to individually charge all the microphones by plugging in a USB cable on each one and make sure that it's in and the light lights up, versus putting charging bases in for all the microphones that you just drop in. But when doing that, the interface that you get to see on the computer is a little bit different. You get a little more information if you use the charging bases. So for that, the charging extra was like $5,000 for the charging base.
Which is the one you're recommending?
Which is the one I would recommend. I mean, one of the biggest issues we seem to be having lately, aside from the interference or cutting out, is battery levels. We never know what the battery levels truly are at on the microphones. So it's become the biggest issue that I've been able to.
Are these tamper-proof?
It's tamper-proof. There's no settings on them whatsoever unless you have a screwdriver to get to the bottom.
All right, so-
Now, how many mics will we get?
16 mics total. I think you had 15 when all of that was working.
Did we have
the other one?
Yeah.
The only reason for 16 is that there's an access point for each 8 sets of microphones. You have to buy it by the 8 and 8.
Wow.
So you might as well buy, just figure out the extra microphone to go with it.
And if we're to go forward with this, the payment would be paid by basically increasing the amount of an already existing bond.
Yeah, so John put it through in front of me to increase my IT equipment bond that was passed last December. There was already various items in there, so.
So, request to amend section 2, paragraph A of the $1,103,400 bond ordinance adopted December 4th, 18, last month, to increase the amount authorized for computer and other equipment by $35,000, which is a little bit more than this quote, is that right?
The quote, the one that I was recommending was 36 and change.
A little bit less, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't get 3 quotes yet, I kind of did this pretty quickly, and there's a couple items that may change, but it should be in our favor. This is just, I need no less, but this is like a budgetary quote, so 35 is a comfortable number.
I think this 3 years is something that's really been.
Yeah.
Bring us into the
Bring us into the 20th century.
Unfortunately for me, I can never.
What are the
diagnose
capabilities of
my
this
issues.
new system besides just sound? Is there any visual?
I missed the question.
Is there like, can you hook it up to,
Live streaming?
yeah, live streaming, anything like that?
Well, so that'll kind of marry with the rest of what's over here. So this is live, we could live stream with what's right there now, but we're recording to a USB stick currently, just to try and test it out. It would still marry through this system, we still have audio out. It also goes on the network, so I can kind of pick it up in other rooms and other areas throughout the whole building, or even other facilities that we're connected to from this building. So there's other options that I can play with it, because it's more current like a computer, where the other system is more analog, like a cassette player that you gotta kind of carry around if you want to move around. So.
Is there any attachments or something you could get for like the hearing impaired or anything like that?
There's all kinds of different options for the microphones. I put the goosenecks in there, but there's other options that, and the one little picture, they had a couple, did you have the picture from before? I don't have it on there. They have a couple, they have the microphone and two like, pocket hook onto your belt sets like that you can have
I mean, can they be connected with hearing aids?
I don't think with a hearing aid, but there's other
Move it
options.
so that-
Yeah, there are other options. They all marry to this system. I could get it for the list, but.
Yeah, I think that'd be really desirable. I know.
Yeah, you should.
Well,
Yeah, like I said-
I have a phone, it goes right into the hearing aid.
Oh, is that right?
Movie home.
Oh, that might be
movie
available
doing it
then.
now. It's called loop systems, right?
How about if it includes a hearing aid?
I'm sure
Yeah.
that, I mean, I'm getting the audio on the network. If it doesn't talk through this, I can get it through some other piece of equipment and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So it's a modern system, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a coming thing.
You know,
Yeah,
like
one
a
of the biggest
headset or
things is the
something.
ceiling speakers. I was trying to get, finish the quote on that, because I guess the ceiling speakers in there are like paper woofers. They're meant more for like a school, so the acoustics that come out of them are not very, you could upgrade all you want in the back and it'll never sound good until you change those as well.
How about us, we have a band? We had some
You can have
music,
a band when
we had some music in there, no, we did have some music in the chamber.
We've played movies in there, we've had, the Burning Kingston's done music in there, but they usually always opt to set up their own speakers and stuff because of how crappy that system is.
But this will sound nice.
This should sound much nicer.
Is there a motion on?
Can I ask
Yes.
a question? So, would you consider, or is it possible to include a table microphone? They have them at the Board of Ed where it just sits on the table and you can turn it on and it picks up everything in the room, because there are certain boards and commissions that seem particularly uncomfortable using the gooseneck microphones, the planning board in particular.
Oh.
They often refuse to use them. I don't know if they're refusing to use it because they're uncomfortable with it or because it doesn't often work, but like one of those kind of microphones that just sits in the middle of the table.
Yeah, I could look into that. There were pieces that go to this as well that all married to that system, the Shure Microflex wireless system, but yeah. I could-
It could be helpful, especially for the planning board.
Because that's basically what this one is, but this is a cheap $20 microphone. Something that married to the system would be nice, but I could look into that. This is not a set, we can still play with this, but it shouldn't, it's kind of swapping of numbers at this point. It's not really a huge change. It's just to get into the buy-in of that kind of style system, that's kind of the funding that I need to get that project going.
Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Kyle, thank you very much. There's a lot of work in here. Appreciate that. Okay, any other items to come before, otherwise, entertain? There is one other thing. John is not here. As you know, John generally provides a financial committee update. And I'll just read a couple items. I didn't duplicate this, 'cause I just got it late this afternoon. I'll just read a couple highlights. Through November 2018, approximately 92% of the year, approximately 73% of the general fund has been expended, and 78% has been expended or encumbered. So we're in good shape.
Wow.
Okay. Sales tax revenue is currently tracking 4.31% over the prior year. There are, as always, there are the puts and takes of this, but some things are are tracking very favorably and some are tracking unfavorably, but the net is, you know, with 92% of the year through, that is 11 months, approximately 78% has been expended or encumbered. And sales tax revenue is tracking 4.31%. John will give a more, as he usually does, a more complete report on this next month.
Sounded good.
So it's looking good for 2018. And they're currently we're currently looking at evaluating auditing firms before we do a contract to do the audit.
That ought to happen every year, though.
Huh?
That ought to happen every year. Every year?
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. There's still
Okay.
some more of these things that need to be
Thank you.
signed.
Are there twos or threes?
These are twos.